Hello and welcome to World at War. I'm your host, Johan Castell. Yahya Sinwar, the 62-year-old Hamas leader and the chief architect of the Palestinian militant group's attack on Israel on October 7 last year, was killed by the Israeli military in southern Gaza's Rafah on Wednesday. Considered to be Israel's #1 target since October 7, Sinwar was reportedly killed fighting a group of Israeli trainee soldiers who came upon him by chance. Sinwar's death elicited further aggressive rhetoric from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said that the war is not over in Gaza, but it could be the beginning of the end. The international community, though, expressed hope that the killing by Israel of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar could help bring an end to the fighting in the Gaza Strip. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, struck a defiant tone, saying Hamas was alive and will remain alive despite the death of its leader. Our next report brings you the details.
The killing of Yahya Sinwar, the plotter of October 7th attack last year on Israel, could well be the turning point in the year-long war in the Gaza Strip. Involved with Hamas since its founding, Sinwar had spent 22 years in Israeli prison before being released in 2011 during a prisoner exchange. Following the deaths of Hamas's political leaders Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran and senior commander Mohammed Deif in Gaza in July this year, Sinwar was spearheading the Palestinian militant group. Not only did he direct Hamas's response to the Israeli war in Gaza, but played a key role in the negotiations of a ceasefire as well. Such was his influence that reportedly the negotiators at peace talks in Cairo and Doha would halt discussions and wait for instructions from Sinwar in Gaza. On Wednesday afternoon, sometime between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., a patrol from the Bislak Brigade training unit of the Israeli army was conducting searches of the Tal al-Sultan neighborhood in Rafah. They chanced upon a small group of fighters moving between buildings. With the help of drones, they were able to pinpoint the fighters' locations. The patrol exchanged fire with the group, resulting in the death of 3 fighters. One wounded fighter moved into a damaged building, pursued by a drone. Defiant till his dying moments, Sinwar, who was injured and resting in a damaged armchair, threw a stick at the drone that was searching the building to find the last masked fighter. The building was then shelled by tanks and missiles, leading to the death of Hamas's leader, Sinwar. Sinwar's body was taken to a laboratory in Israel where dental records, fingerprints and DNA testing was done.
Yahya Sinwar is dead. He was killed in Rafah by the brave soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. While this is not the end of the war in Gaza, it's the beginning of the end. To the people of Gaza, I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages. Hamas is holding 101 hostages in Gaza, who are citizens of 23 countries, citizens of Israel, but citizens of many other countries.
The next day, addressing a press conference after meeting with other EU leaders at a summit in Brussels, French President Emmanuel Macron underscored the significance of Sinwar's death and stressed upon the urgent need for humanitarian aid to Gaza.
Today has been marked by the death of Yahya Sinwar. This day is a turning point, as well as a military success for Israel. I think, as I say to the Israeli families of October 7, this occasion should be seized upon so that all the hostages can be freed and so that the war can be finally stopped. Indeed, it is necessary to put an end to military operations and after this result, accept a ceasefire in Gaza to finally open a credible political perspective for both Israelis and Palestinians. We are working on it with all our partners, Israelis, Arabs, Americans. On the day after the war in Gaza, one will have to give Israel solid guarantees for its security, reform the Palestinian Authority, and advance towards a two-state solution. An immediate ceasefire in Gaza is needed. There is an urgent need to increase humanitarian operations, which are currently at their lowest point, and advance on stopping the violence perpetrated against the Palestinians by the settlers in the West Bank. It is up to Prime Minister Netanyahu to listen to what is being said by France and all those who are attached to the security of Israel.
The sentiment was echoed by other world leaders who said that the world will not tolerate any more Israeli excuses on humanitarian assistance. Though still supportive of Israel, they consider the death of Sinwar as an opportunity for a step towards a ceasefire, which has proven elusive so far.
We strongly support Israel's right to self-defense, particularly in the face of the Iranian regime's actions. But look, I do think that the death of Sinwar provides an opportunity for a step towards that ceasefire that we've long called for. Thank you.
There has been, however, no let-up in the war following the killing of Hamas leader Sinwar. The Israeli military appeared to continue its offensive in the north and in the Jabalia refugee camp. On Friday evening, the Hamas-run administration in Gaza said that at least 33 people, 21 of them women, were killed and 85 injured in an overnight Israeli airstrike. On Saturday, a drone was launched towards Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's home in the northern Israeli town of Caesarea. The Israeli premier was not in the vicinity and there was no casualties reported. With no end in sight to the war, the skeptics believe that the killing of Yahya Sinwar is not the final chapter of this war, which has killed more than 42,000 Gazans so far.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky unveiled a long-awaited victory plan to the Ukrainian parliament on Wednesday, presenting the plan which aims to strengthen Ukraine's position enough to end the war with Russia as soon as next year. Zelensky urged his war-weary country to stay united. In his address, Zelensky also criticized China, Iran, and North Korea for their backing of Russia, calling them a coalition of criminals. The next day, Zelensky presented the victory plan to the European Union, pitching for a NATO membership invitation and a major increase in military support for Kyiv's campaign against Russia's invasion. Kremlin has dismissed the victory plan, saying that Kyiv needed to sober up. Given the advance of the Russian forces in the east, is the victory plan a sensible, practical strategy? Or is Zelensky being self-delusional? Our next report explores.
Ukraine's parliament, Verkhovna Rada, witnessed the unveiling of an ambitious victory plan on Wednesday. The Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, while presenting the plan to Ukrainian lawmakers, emphasized the need for specific weapons and an unconditional invitation to join NATO. He further added that if his victory plan is followed, the Russia-Ukraine war, which began with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, could end as early as next year. The victory plan outlined by Zelensky consists of 5 key points.
The first point is the invitation to NATO now. The second point is defense, an irreversible strengthening of Ukrainian defense against the aggressor. It is realistic to defend our positions on the battlefield in Ukraine, and at the same time it is our duty to return the war to the territory of Russia. Ukraine proposes to place on its soil a comprehensive non-nuclear strategic deterrence package, which will be sufficient to protect Ukraine from any military threat from Russia, and which will maximally narrow the range of Russian actions. Russia can either join an honest diplomatic process for a just end to the war, or be guaranteed to lose the ability to continue an aggressive war as a result of Ukraine applying the deterrence package against certain singled-out Russian military objectives.
Zelensky also called for a joint protection by the US and the EU of Ukraine's critical natural resources and joint use of their economic potential. And the last point, intended for the post-war period only, is replacing some US troops stationed across Europe with Ukrainian soldiers. In addition to this, 3 addendums remain secret, to be shared with only Ukraine's partners. The Kyiv residents are believed to be mostly supportive of the plan. Recently, the Ukrainian president concluded a whirlwind tour of several European capitals in a bid to win approval for the 5-point plan from his Western partners. Though the NATO countries have declared Ukraine to be on an irreversible path to membership, the United States and Germany have led opposition to Ukraine's immediate entry, believing it would effectively put the alliance at war against nuclear-armed Russia. Reportedly, the Biden administration is concerned that the plan lacks a comprehensive strategy and is little more than a repackaged request for more weapons and the lifting of restrictions on the use of long-range missiles. On the eve of the two-day NATO defense ministers' meeting in Brussels, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte told reporters that the victory plan would be on the table.
On the victory plan, this is clearly Ukraine's victory plan, which we, of course, take note of. We will discuss. There are many items on that agenda which we will have to really deepen out, understand what is behind it. This is something which will take place behind closed doors, also with allies. So I will not comment on every element in the plan, but it is of course a strong signal from Zelensky and his team that they designed this plan, that they are now taking it forward. That doesn't mean that I here can say I support the whole plan.
As a bleak winter of power shortages looms and Ukraine suffers losses along the eastern front, Zelensky is already facing a tough time replenishing Ukrainian forces with an unpopular mobilization drive. At a precarious time like this, it would not be easy to convince an exhausted public that the war could end soon.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un reminded his soldiers on Thursday that South Korea is a foreign hostile country and that Pyongyang has jettisoned any idea of reunification. The remarks came a day after North Korean state media reported that the National Assembly amended the constitution to designate South Korea as a hostile state. The amendment is in line with Kim Jong-un's vow to drop the unification of the two Koreas as a national goal. On Tuesday, Pyongyang blew up frontline road and rail links connecting it to the south. Given the recent escalation in tensions and a deepening stalemate in diplomacy, the likelihood of possible clashes along the rivals' tense border areas has increased significantly. But will it lead to North Korea launching a full-scale attack, especially considering the superior US and South Korean forces? Our next report explores.
The two Koreas, despite remaining officially at war, have long defined their ties as a special relationship. This special characterization, instead of state-to-state relations, was maintained with a view to eventual reunification. But the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Thursday chose to describe the ties with the South as an evil relationship that came to an end with the detonation of border road and rail sections between the two countries on Tuesday. After months of laying fresh mines and ramping up security on the border, Pyongyang blew up roads and railways linking it to the south. The move was described as part of the step-by-step implementation to thoroughly separate the Koreas. Kim Jong-un further insisted that Pyongyang won't hesitate to attack its rival if the South infringes upon its sovereignty. These remarks came during Kim Jong-un's visit to the headquarters of the North Korean People's Army 2nd Corps. During his visit, the North Korean leader also examined important documents outlining the North's military action plans for coping with different developments of the situation. Noteworthy is the fact that in January this year, Kim Jong-un had described Seoul as his country's principal enemy. Analysts are of the opinion that the North's constitutional amendment designating South Korea as a hostile state essentially serves as leader Kim Jong-un's survival strategy.
I believe that North Korea's strategic goal of moving towards two hostile states is essentially Kim Jong-un's survival strategy. In other words, Kim Jong-un is saying, let's build a wall between the two Koreas so we are not conscious of each other and each of us can survive on our own. If there are two hostile states, there is no need for a system competition between the North and South. By building this wall, North Korea only needs to control its citizens well.
As Pyongyang changes the way it thinks about its border, the current armistice agreement, which ended active fighting in the 1950 to 1953 Korean War, may lose its relevance. Such a shift would result in a transition from a temporary military demarcation line under ceasefire to a formal border system between the two warring nations. On the 1st of October, as South Korea celebrated its 76th Armed Forces Day, the South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol issued a warning that the North Korean regime would collapse if it attempts to use nuclear weapons.
If North Korea attempts to use nuclear weapons, it will face the resolute and overwhelming response of our military and the South Korea-US alliance. That day will be the end of the North Korean regime.
A day after, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had retorted by warning that North Korea could use nuclear weapons in potential conflicts with South Korea and the United States. In recent weeks, North Korea has ratcheted its anti-South Korea rhetoric. On the 11th of October, North Korea accused Seoul of sending drones to drop anti-regime leaflets over Pyongyang, an accusation immediately refuted by Seoul. The sharp spike in tensions has resulted in the Korean peninsula increasingly resembling a powder keg. Any misstep and all hell will break loose.
The Southeast Asian nation of Myanmar has been locked in a civil war ever since the military junta deposed the democratically elected civilian government of Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi in a coup d'etat in February 2021. The Myanmar military, once considered the most powerful army in Southeast Asia, has been fighting on multiple fronts against an armed resistance movement, loosely allied with several ethnic minority rebel groups with a bitter history with the military. Since last October, the military has suffered repeated blows at the hands of the resistance fighters and ethnic minority rebels. In the latest setback for the embattled junta, a Myanmar ethnic armed group, the Taang National Liberation Army, seized another town on a strategic highway to China on Sunday. Last month, the Myanmar military had offered an olive branch for the first time to its rivals since its 2021 coup. Take a look at this report.
Since the 27th of October last year, an alliance of three Myanmar ethnic minority groups, the Taang National Liberation Army, the Arakan Army and the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, collectively known as the Brotherhood Alliance, has launched coordinated attacks on the Myanmar military. The offensive, named by rebels as Operation 1027, signifying the date on which it began, has made inroads into the junta-controlled areas in northern Shan State, Kaya State in the east and Rakhine State in the west. A Beijing-brokered truce in January halted clashes in the northern Shan State, but the alliance renewed offensive against the military in June along the highway to China's Yunnan province. On the 13th of October, after weeks of fighting, the Taang National Liberation Army captured the last remaining military base in the strategic town of Hsipaw. Home to around 20,000 people, the principal town of Hsipaw sits on a highway from Myanmar's second largest city, Mandalay, to the China border. a trade route worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually. After taking control of the town, the TNLA fighters, clad in green camouflage gear, were seen walking in a single file past buildings whose walls were pockmarked with bullet holes. Reportedly, at least 100 soldiers from the military had been disarmed since the group launched its attack, though the number of TNLA or military casualties is yet to be ascertained. Reportedly, the fighting has stopped, but the locals remain fearful of military airstrikes. In the month of August, in what is considered to be the biggest defeat for the Myanmar military in decades, the strategic city of Lashio, around 60 kilometers along the highway from Hsipaw, had fallen to MNDAA. These setbacks have severely dented the battlefield credibility of the Myanmar military, which is at its most vulnerable in the past 60 years and is facing its sternest challenge. The deepening crisis in Myanmar was a topic of discussion at the recently concluded ASEAN summit in Vientiane, Laos as well.
Myanmar remains an increasingly complex path. Violence is growing, the humanitarian situation is spiraling. One-third of the population is in dire need of humanitarian assistance, millions have been forced to flee their homes, and 7 years after the forced mass displacement of the Rohingya, durable solutions seem a distant reality. The people of Myanmar need peace, and I call on all countries to leverage their influence towards an inclusive political solution to the conflict and deliver the peaceful future that the people of Myanmar deserve.
Last month, in an unexpected outreach to its enemies that was quickly rebuffed, Myanmar's ruling military had issued a statement urging its armed opponents to abandon what it called terrorism and join the political fold in a general election next year.
Ethnic armed organizations and People Defense Force terrorists fighting against the state are invited to contact the state to resolve the political issues through party politics or electoral process in order to be able to join hands with the people to emphasize durable peace and development by discarding the armed terrorist way.
After 3.5 years of conflict, the Myanmar junta has shown an inclination to engage with rebels. It also sent a representative to the ASEAN meeting for the first time in more than 3 years. Is this the beginning of a peace process in the embattled Southeast Asian nation? Only time will answer this very crucial question.
That's all we could pack into this edition of World at War. Thanks for watching, and until we return next weekend, stay safe. Goodbye.